Thank you all for joining back in. I hope you had an enjoyable lunch. We are going to get started with the NSF policy update session led by Jean Feldman. Over to you, Jean.
Thanks so much. Could you change to the next slide, please? My name is Jean Feldman. I have been at the EPSCoR PI meeting many times over the last few years, but I've missed a few years, so I'm delighted to be back here with you today. I am head of the policy office in the Division of Institution and Award Support in the Office of Budget, Finance, and Award Management. Next slide. We've got a whole lot to talk about today. I'm going to talk, of course, the topic that I always start my presentations with EPSCoR, our PAP guide status, the proposal and award policies and procedures guide, the status and what our proposed changes are. Some very important revised FAQs on current and pending support that we've been receiving from the community. And I want to make sure that you all are aware of what these answers are so that it will help you when you are preparing your current and pending support submission to NSF. I'm going to talk a bit about science and security. We implemented in October a post-award term and condition, as well as a new requirement in post-award reporting as part of your research performance progress report that I'd like to go over with you as well. I wanted to emphasize a DCL that was issued last year, the Career Life Balance Supplemental Funding Dear Colleague letter, and talk to you a bit about what it is and how it can be used. Some updates on research.gov, as well as ending with just a heads up about our NSF Grants Conference, which will be held virtually this spring. Next slide, please. So let me talk about the proposal and award policies and procedures guide and the implementation schedule. Well, for many years, we were on a schedule whereby we announced the PAP guide in the fall, and it became available in the January timeframe. We have changed that last year, and we're going to continue with this schedule. It was released in the Federal Register for public comment from December 12th through the 14th. We have resolved all of those comments, and I'm pleased to note that the document is now with the Office of Management and Budget for their final approval. We hope to post it around the beginning of July, and it will go into effect on October 4th, 2021. So again, this is a very different time frame, but look forward to this schedule over the next several years, because doing it on a fiscal year basis is how we plan to do it in the future. Next slide, please. So what are the proposed changes? Again, I am allowed to speak to you about these changes at a pretty high level. I cannot, of course, make any major announcements in terms of how the actual text will appear until we get clearance from the Office of Management and Budget. But I want to make sure that you at least know the high level changes. So when it does come out in July, you're certainly going to be prepared to see what those changes are. So what's the first one? We are going to implement, or we have implemented 2 CFR 200. 2 CFR 200 is the administrative requirements for financial assistance for the federal government. It was released in a new version of 2 CFR 200 was released in August of last year, and we were told that we had to implement it by November 12th of 2020. We did that in our terms and conditions, but as you know, the way we implement the PAP guide, we have to provide an opportunity for public comment. So we are completing with issuance of the PAP guide, our implementation of 2 CFR 200. Addition of context language for proposal sections. This is really important. It may seem like a minor change, but what we've now done is each of the proposal sections now include contextual information that identify the purpose of each section and how NSF uses the information provided. This is really, really helpful to the community because when you are preparing a particular section, you're going to now understand fully how it will be used as part of the merit review process. This began with identifying how NSF uses the biographical sketch and current and pending support sections in last year's PAP guide, and now we've applied that to each of the proposal sections. We've made hope to make an expansion of the biographical sketch from 2 to 3 pages. I'll be talking about that in a few more slides, as well as further clarification of current and pending support. This last year and a half, I have been working very closely with Rebecca Kaiser. She's Chief of Research Security Strategy and Policy at NSF, to develop NSF's clarifications and what we believe our expectations are. Now, I can tell you overall, our expectations over the last few decades have really not changed. We just want to make sure that we've incorporated as much information that we have received and have developed in the way of frequently asked questions that we've put on the Policy Office website that will really assist you in fully understanding what we want and how this information will be used. We are adding a new planning proposal as a new proposal type. And this type of proposal will be used to support the initial conceptualization, planning, and collaborative activities that aim to formulate new and sound plans for what will be large-scale projects in emerging research areas for future submission to an NSF program. The request will be for up to $100,000 and 2 years in duration. And we will be building this out as a new functionality in research.gov, and it will be available for use beginning in October. Travel proposals. We, last year, as part of our PAP guide implementation, we established NSF's expectations for conference proposals that the conference organizer have a policy or code of conduct for sexual harassment, other forms of harassment, and sexual assault. We have clarified what those expectations are further in this version, as well as expanded it to now specify that for our travel proposals, which are to travel to conferences typically, we now specify or will specify that a meeting organizer for a travel proposal must have a written policy or code of conduct that addresses sexual harassment, other forms of harassment, and sexual assault. And that includes, and it also includes accessible means of reporting violations. The proposer is not required to submit these policies like the conference proposal to NSF for review. We just established this as a requirement, and it will be added as a new term and condition to our conference and travel proposal terms and conditions. We also have added career life balance supplements. I'm going to talk about that some more, as well as increase the visibility of research.gov. And I'm going to talk more about how we plan to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, science and security goals at NSF. We've been talking about this for a few years now. And the environment around us continues to change. NSF's goal is to maintain that vibrant science and engineering community, which relies on collaborations both globally and domestically. We are not changing that, and that has not changed in any of the issuances that we put out. At the same time, we recognize, and there has been a lot of press about the fact that there are actors out there who are not upholding the values of the science and engineering community and trying to take advantage of that openness. Like I said, our values have not changed. What has changed is the scope and the sophistication of the activities threatening our research community, such as certain foreign government-sponsored talent recruitment programs. These activities create new risks to the integrity of NSF's mission and operation, and therefore NSF is taking multiple steps to mitigate these risks in concert with other agencies and our stakeholders. Next slide, please. Now, to address this issue, NSF makes it very clear that we do require disclosures of information in our proposals. These come about in 3 different sets of proposal sections. The first, collaborator and other affiliations. That obviously is a single copy document provided by each individual identified as senior personnel, and it is used to manage reviewer selection. Again, as I mentioned, it's provided as a single copy doc, and it is not shared with reviewers. It is for use by NSF staff only. We then have the biographical sketch. Well, the biographical sketch is used to answer that question in our merit review criteria that says, do they have the qualifications, the individual or team, to conduct the proposed activities? And so all of the senior personnel provide that biographical sketch, and it's used not only by NSF, but by our reviewers to also assess those qualifications. We have a third disclosure document, and that, of course, is current and pending support. Current and pending support is used to assess the capacity of the individual to carry out the research as proposed, as well as to help assess any potential overlap or duplication with the project being proposed. NSF has, I'm very, very enthusiastic to announce, has developed a new table that will be linked in the PAP guide that identifies all of the pre-award and post-award disclosures related to the biographical sketch and current and pending support. And it will then list the type of activity and in which document that disclosure must be made. For example, in-kind contributions not intended for use on the project being proposed and that have an associated time commitment are disclosed in current and pending support. Project reports that you will submit in the future, as well as potentially in a post-award term and condition notification to NSF. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to talk about the policy implementation of our biographical sketch. Contrary to what PIs might think, there is, again, as I mentioned before, a reason for every single piece of information that we ask for in a proposal, and we want you to understand that use. Again, as I've already said, this is going to help assess whether the individual or team has those necessary qualifications. As I'm sure you're aware, as of October 5th, 2020, NSF requires use of an NSF-approved format to prepare your biographical sketch. There are currently 2 approved formats, one in Science CV and one is an NSF fillable format, and both of those are linked in the PAP guide. NSF has always required that senior personnel identify their appointments. The latest version of the PAP guide makes it clear that in addition to including the individual's titled academic, professional, or institutional appointments at the proposing organization, the individual also must identify all current domestic or foreign professional appointments that are outside of their organization. We made this clarification because we discovered that previously there was a sentiment in the research community that if no actual funds were provided with an appointment, it did not need to be identified in the biographical sketch. So this PAP guide makes it clear that we expect all of those appointments to be identified. Now, I have to tell you that folks are telling us as they work through preparing these formats that it's very challenging to fit all of the information that we ask for, particularly all of the appointments that we ask for within the 2-page limitation. And so it is our intention to expand the biographical sketch to 3 pages to assist and help with that issue. We also get a number of questions about the synergistic activity section of the biosketch. We ask for a list of up to 5 distinct examples that demonstrate the broader impact of the individual's professional and scholarly activities that focus on the integration and transfer of knowledge as well as its creation. Each item should list a single activity and must not be followed by a listing of sub-activities. For example, a PI can state that they served on 10 review panels, but it is not necessary for the PI to list each specific panel and the dates that they attended those panels for that distinct example. So as you can see, there is a reference to the full coverage here in the PAP guide for the biographical sketch. And we hope that not only this table that I mentioned will be very helpful in identifying what precisely NSF wants disclosed, does not need to be disclosed, and at what part of the process. So we look forward very much to sharing that with you in July. Next slide, please. Science and security policy implementation of current and pending support. So whereas the biosketch helps NSF assess the capability of an individual or team, current and pending support is used to assess capacity of an individual to carry out their role in the project. NSF also uses this information, as I previously mentioned, to help assess overlap and duplication with other projects. Submission of current and pending support has been a very, very long-standing NSF requirement, decades and decades long. But here again, we found that there was really a disconnect between what we considered the established policy and how the community interpreted that policy. We discovered that proposers in many cases thought we only wanted support provided by their institution or through their institution. So we clarified that all current and pending support must be included, irrespective of whether that support is provided through the proposing organization or is directly to the individual. Now, remember, that's the purpose of the current and pending support, is to assess the capacity of an individual to contribute to the project being proposed. So in situations where no salary is being requested and no effort will be expended, that does not need to be reported to NSF. Next slide, please. Let me talk a bit about post-award disclosure. So as of October 5th, 2020, we implemented a new award term and condition that requires an organization to notify NSF if it discovers that a PI or co-PI on an active NSF award failed to disclose current support or in-kind contribution information as part of the proposal submission process. And if that's the case, we've identified specifically what, as part of the term and condition, what information must be provided, and the fact that it must be provided 30 days within becoming aware of the failure to disclose. Now, the reason that this becomes important is because, as I addressed in the last slide, there were individuals who really did not understand NSF's expectations. And so they may have not provided information that really was required to be submitted by NSF. The AOR has to submit this information via the other request category in the notification and request module in research.gov. And we have an internal process at NSF to assess these, starting with the program officer, working through NSF's Chief of Research, Security, Strategy, and Policy, and where absolutely necessary, with our Division of Grants and Agreements or Division of Acquisition and Cooperative Support. Next slide, please. So this new term and condition is outlines the organization's responsibilities. So what we've included in this term and condition is precisely the information that we want that we need to be submitted as part of this request. Now, many of these will definitely be familiar to you because most of it is information that comes directly from the PAP guide on what you should be providing as part of current and pending support when you submit that proposal. Now, the AOR will need to provide PI's name or co-PI, and this applies only in this case to PIs and co-PIs. I realize that as part of the proposal submission process, it applies to all senior personnel, but this specific term and condition only applies to PIs and co-PIs. So they're going to identify the PI or co-PI's name, title, award number, the source of support, the primary place of performance, and the start and end date and the award amount. Again, things that will be very familiar to you. But there are a few additional items on this list because NSF really felt uncomfortable having information provided by the institution where they weren't required to actually consider the impact of this new information on what is being provided to NSF. So what are those other categories that have been added? A brief description of the major goals of the project, a description of any overlap or duplication of the project with the NSF award. What is the impact on the ability of the PI or co-PI to carry out this award? And then finally, the person months or partial person months per year that are committed to the project. This information is going to be very helpful in assessing what to do next with this information from an NSF perspective. Next slide, please. Now, when we were developing this term and condition, and we did work with colleagues in the Federal Demonstration Partnership to get feedback on their thoughts on this, there was a lot of feedback that the kind of information that you would have available for an in-kind contribution is very different than what you would have with a proposal or project that you would be reporting on. And so they made it very clear during this comment process that we really, it is essential that NSF reconsider what kinds of information. And so that's precisely what we've done. The AOR must submit for a post-award disclosure of in-kind contribution information, the PI and co-PI name, source of support, primary place of performance, the summary of the in-kind contributions, a description of any overlap or duplication with the NSF award, the impact on the ability of the PI or co-PI to carry out that project, and then the person months or partial person months. Again, this helps us give the necessary information to assess what, if anything, needs to be done considering the new information that is being provided after this award has been made. Next slide, please. Research Performance Progress Report. On October 5th, 2020, NSF also changed our requirements in the annual and final project report. As part of this, the biggest change made to the RPPR format is that PIs and co-PIs must notify NSF when other active support has changed, either since the award was made or since the last reporting period. And they must include a revised current and pending support using one of the NSF approved formats as part of this notification. Now, let's make it very clear here that this is a format that is a research format. In other words, this is a format that was approved a few years ago by the National Science and Technology Council, and it has already been implemented by a number of our other research agencies, such as NIH. NSF did it a little differently. We wanted to relook at our entire annual and final project report format to make sure it contained all of the information that NSF needed in order to make assessments about how the project was proceeding. Now, this information on current and pending support that you're providing is different than the post-award disclosure information I just spoke about. That was if the current and pending support wasn't disclosed as part of the proposal process. With the RPPR, if there is a change in active other support, the information should be reported in the annual or final project report. And such information, and this is a frequently asked question, so let me make it clear right now. Such information is only due at the time the report is due. We're getting folks who say, I got new other support. I know my project report isn't due for a while. How do I submit this information to you? It is provided and only due at the time the report is due. Research.gov also checks to ensure that the current and pending support document, again, as I've mentioned before, is in an NSF approved format. Well, there have been a few additional new questions that have also been added, then again, are on the federal-wide research standard that asks for the percent of the award budget that was spent in a foreign country, if there's been a change in the primary performance site location, and space to provide details about the impact on teaching and educational experience. There are also standardized instructions for most of the questions. And again, those are federal-wide instructions, and where necessary, NSF also provides NSF-specific instructions, and many of these have either been clarified or fine-tuned throughout. I also think it's important to emphasize the fact that when I said we took a fresh look at this, we also looked to see where we could consolidate questions and make the process less burdensome for investigators. So this is something NSF's worked very hard on, and it went into effect on project reports submitted on or after October 5th, 2020. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to switch gears a bit and talk about a couple of frequently asked questions that have come up recently that we want to save you the time and energy of working through the FAQs, and to let you know, because we added FAQs specifically to address these individual issues. Person month information included in current and pending support may absolutely differ from the person months requested on the budget for a given project. And this may be one of the most fundamental misunderstandings of our expectations with current and pending support. The information contained on the budget is separate and distinct from the information entered on current and pending support regarding how much time the individual is planning or has committed to spend on a project. For example, if an individual is not requesting salary for a project, then no person months would be shown on the budget. They even wouldn't be put on there. However, on that very same person, they may be expending effort on the project. They just aren't requesting funding. So when you're putting in your current and pending support, a number greater than 0 would have to be entered into current and pending support. If the individual is not requesting salary and will not be expending any effort whatsoever, then the project should not be reported in current and pending support. Senior personnel also have to report on any in-kind support that they receive. In-kind contributions with no associated time commitment that are intended for use on the project being proposed actually did not go in current and pending support. Rather, they go into facilities, equipment, and other resources so that a reviewer can look at facilities, equipment, and other resources, look at the budget, and see what kind of resources would be available for that project should it be funded. So that's another clarification that we wanted you to be aware of. If the in-kind contributions are not intended for use on the project or proposal being proposed to NSF and have no associated time commitment, then the information is not required to be reported. So we're hoping that providing this information to you will have a better give you a better understanding of how to fill out this information to NSF. Next slide, please. There are another frequently asked question that has come up a lot recently are situations where if there is no effort in a given year, you've got a 3-year project and in year 2 of the project, there will not be any effort. What, if anything, should be reported in current and pending support for that year? So we let you know that in instances where senior personnel are not actively working on the project during each year, you only report on the years in which they are committing time, and that's all that should be listed. So in the example above, only years 1 and 3 would be entered in current and pending support, and year 2 would not be listed. And yes, our current formats support that functionality. We also have a link to the full set of current and pending support FAQs on this slide, and we would strongly encourage you to take a look at those before preparing a new current and pending support document for NSF. Next slide, please. I'm going to really change gears a bit here and talk about what I mentioned in the beginning about career-life balance supplemental funding requests. A Dear Colleague letter went out last year regarding NSF's initiative to help reduce the rate at which early career researchers depart from the STEM workforce. I mentioned this earlier, that it is being written into a forthcoming PAP guide as a distinct type of supplemental funding that can be submitted to NSF. So career life balance supplements to existing research awards may be requested for the following purposes: to support additional personnel, as an example, a technician or research assistant, to sustain research when the PI, co-PI, or other member of the senior personnel is on family leave for primary dependent care responsibilities and other direct family considerations, and to support additional personnel to sustain research while a postdoctoral researcher or graduate student being supported by NSF on the award is on family leave for primary dependent care responsibilities and other direct family considerations. There are special instructions in the Dear Colleague letter for Graduate Research Fellowship Program, GRFP awardee institutions, and how they may request supplemental funding. And it makes it clear that to support additional personnel to sustain the research of the graduate fellow while on approved medical deferral due to primary dependent care family leave situations. And the requirements around that are definitely very clearly outlined in this DCL. Provided that a postdoctoral fellowship award funded through one of NSF's fellowship programs is made to an institution and not directly to the fellow, the awardee may also request that supplemental funding while the postdoc fellow is on family leave for primary dependent care responsibilities, et cetera. The supplemental funding request may include funding for up to 6 months of salary support or stipend for a maximum of $30,000 in direct costs of salary compensation or stipend. But the duration of the salary or stipend support cannot exceed the duration of the family leave. Fringe benefits and associated indirect costs, but not tuition, may be included in addition to the salary costs, and therefore the total supplemental funding request may exceed $30,000. And that helps us to avoid a situation where if we drew an arbitrary line, that we would be imposing a cost sharing requirement. But I would absolutely encourage you for these situations where this is necessary to take a look at this DCL and then in the PAP guide when it comes out, because again, it's NSF's initiative to help reduce the rate at which early career researchers depart from the STEM workforce. Next slide, please. Research.gov. NSF issued Important Notice 147 in September of 2020 to inform the community about our transition to the preparation and submission of all proposals from FastLane to research.gov. In other words, actually removing FastLane option from each funding opportunity, and we are targeting that completion by 2022. That's why I'm spending some time in this presentation on this. Funding opportunities will clearly specify whether submission via research.gov is available or required. I think it's important to note here that when we did a survey on research.gov and proposal submission, what many individuals told us is, we love FastLane. It sounds, we're not saying anything one way or the other about research.gov, but we love FastLane. We know how to use FastLane. And until you turn FastLane off, we're pretty much going to keep using FastLane. And research.gov is new technology. FastLane is archaic, very old technology in the computer science parlance. So this important notice laid out the strategy of how NSF would get from where we are now to full use of research.gov for proposal submission. The important notice also indicated that some funding opportunities will begin to require the use of research.gov and will not be available for submission in FastLane. This has been completed for the core bio program solicitations without deadlines, and bio has started removing FastLane as a submission option for solicitations with deadlines. I should note that I serve on a small team that is the coordinating committee for research.gov proposal submission modernization. And we have reached out and met with each individual directorate and office to go over their strategy for how to move and make this change to research.gov. I have to emphasize as part of this presentation that grants.gov does remain an option for submission. Research.gov is also being added to solicitations wherever possible, and we are strongly encouraging its use. As I've mentioned before, there are many reasons for this. Again, FastLane is old. It's very difficult to make cost-efficient system improvements. And the bottom line is having 2 proposal submissions, really 3 if you count grants.gov, is really an inefficient way for us to do business. Also, the user interfaces in FastLane no longer conform to modern industry standards, and it is difficult for users to use, and especially if they're new to it. So again, I'm going to be going over some slides about NSFs and what we're doing for how you get from here to there in the next number of slides, but wanted to point out this time frame of 2022. By the end of 2022, we are hoping to have that transition done. Next slide, please. Now, based on community feedback, we heard one of the things that was really negatively impacting individuals' use of research.gov was font compliant check warnings that they were receiving in research.gov. And these font warnings were absolutely consistent with NSF policy, but they were moving people away from, they got a warning, they said, no, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to go to Fastlane. And they were very concerned about this. So effective November 23rd, 2020, we removed those compliance checks for font type and font size to align with what is currently happening in Fastlane and NSF policy. So again, we made this because we heard loudly and clearly from the community that this was impacting people's use of research.gov. So we do give you a reminder that warnings do not prevent submission, while errors do prevent submission. But we took this strong step because we want to push people to research.gov, not away from research.gov. We do make it very clear, however, that the proposals may be returned without review if the font type or size is not compliant with the PAP guide. And the PAP guide is very clear on what those requirements are. Next slide, please. Now, what are some of the recent research.gov enhancements in the area of proposal types? So we have to note that all of the proposal types are already listed on research.gov. And it is a long list where you go in, it starts with research, and then it goes into rapid, eager, raise, etc. It is only those that are available for use that you can actually select. The unavailable selections are grayed out. And then as new proposal types are enabled, you will be able to select them. So as of right now, what you can currently do are research, rapid, eager, raise, FACED, our facilitation awards for scientists and engineers with disabilities, equipment, and travel. So we're very excited that this list continues to grow and more functionality is available in research.gov. Next slide, please. Another new functionality that is now available is the ability to withdraw a proposal. Proposals are now able to withdraw both single submission and separately submitted collaborative proposals in research.gov. And there are new proposal FAQs that have been added to the submitted proposals page. And I wanted to point this out because this is something that we've received a lot of requests for from the community. Next slide, please. We also have made a lot of enhancements with this desire to move fully to research.gov by the end of 22, a lot more training resources, a new 16-minute video, new how-to guides, new updated FAQs, new call-out boxes to help proposers quickly see the types of submission types that are available. And I just want to make sure folks are aware these are out there and definitely should be shared at your institution because they will certainly make it easier for you to make that transition. Next slide, please. This is just a slide of a big picture of what we have been doing and what's ahead in research.gov for proposal preparation. I've been talking about everything that's available. What we are working on currently are GOLI, grant opportunities for academic liaison with industry, idea labs and conference proposals. We are currently working on the capability to submit letters of intent, preliminary proposals, and full proposals related to a preliminary proposal, as well as accomplishment-based renewal proposals. And we are also working on submission of those supplemental funding requests so that you will be able to now submit those in research.gov. And then finally, the future capabilities, we have our third column. Those are what things that we will be working on in the coming months. Next slide, please. We have launched in October a proposal preparation demo site to help you prepare and edit proposals before preparing them actually in research.gov. It doesn't support the submission of the proposal, and it won't trigger any system-generated email notifications, but it is quite an effective tool to help you prepare this. Now, the organization that you are affiliated with in your NSF account will be incorporated when you are in the proposal preparation demo site, but the only user role will be that of PI. And the only time other users will be able to view and or edit any proposals that you create in the demo site is if you add them to the proposal as a co-PI or other authorized user. If you don't add any users, no one else will be able to access that. All of the compliance checks that are enabled in the actual research.gov proposal submission will also apply in the demo site. And all proposal types that are available in the actual system are also available on the demo site. And then we will continue to update our demo site as new functionality is added. Next slide. I've already mentioned before the training resources, but there are lots of proposal resources already available within the application itself so that you don't have to go multiple places, as well as on the About Preparation and Submission page. Next slide. And then this is just a slide to have links for your future use to show the full listing of resources for the research community. Finally, next slide, we have a spring virtual event coming up the week of June 7th. All sessions will have the opportunity for live Q&A, and they are being recorded and will be available on demand if you're not able to make it. What's really fabulous about this, folks, is that these are free. These are typically things where we go to a hotel, we have to pay the conference fees, etc. And so we have a charge associated with them. This is a real live opportunity to train a lot of people about NSF, as well as about the directorates. And we will, for this particular event, have a breakout session on each of our individual directorates. So I would strongly encourage you to take advantage of that. And with that, it's time to move to any questions that you may have. Next slide. There you go.
All right. Do we have any questions? Please feel free to put your questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Jean, thank you so much. That was so much information.
Yes, I know.
I know there are lots of questions because I have questions.
I see Kristen.
Okay, let me ask a quick question. That's a lot of information for me to digest.
Yes.
So here's something which will be helpful for me. Is there a video which NSF has which shows how to move from Fastlane? So I've been using Fastlane. I'm one of the old guys using Fastlane for the past 20 years, right?
I'm not going to criticize you now.
Okay, so I'm just being old, right?
No, no worries.
So is there it'll be nice to have a help video for Fastlane users to migrate to research.gov.
The bottom line is there are. When I talked about those how-to videos, they literally are the very basics of every screen you're going to see, every field you're going to enter. And so you can put the fast lane to a side and just focus on this video, and it literally does exactly what you're asking. And there are links on the slides, which I've made available, and all you have to do is click on it, and you're going to really receive the necessary training. And thank you for asking that question, because trust me, I know you're not alone. We know our numbers, and they are increasing in terms of usage, but there is still a whole lot of people that continue to use Fastlane. So I'm not saying anything wrong with that, but we are trying to make this transition. So if you watch these videos, there's a lot of how-to, so much that's been put together that it's just a step-by-step of what you need to do. So thank you for asking that question.
And actually, it'll be also useful to have maybe a half-a-day workshop. So, I mean, the problem is you don't even think about it until you write a proposal, and then you go there, oh, Fastlane is not there. Then you say, oh, I'm not going to write a proposal this time. So
we can consider that. That's a great suggestion. And we can consider how, I mean, obviously we've got all of these resources, but actual workshops like we did way back in the day with Fastlane, it's a great suggestion too. And I'll take that back to the coordinator.
It's actually will help me invest my time, basically.
Right.
Otherwise, it will never force me to do it.
Okay.
So it's just the workshop is basically, if we already have the videos, just put it in an organized 4-hour time. So I'm forced to do it. So that'll be really helpful.
Okay. Thanks for your suggestions and feedback.
We have a number of comments, questions in the chat. One was, can you place the NSF Grants Conference link in the chat? And that's something that our team, if you don't have it available, our team can collaborate with you all. And
I can get you that link for dissemination. I don't have the link right here.
Awesome, thank you.
But I can get it for you. Let me write, okay.
And yes, this presentation will be made available. It will be on the meeting website post-meeting. We have another question. Can you say more about what is considered an in-kind distribution?
In-kind contribution. An in-kind contribution is something that you may have on the project. We have examples in the PAP guide of things that might be helpful for you when we call out something. I mean, these are like laboratory space, data sets, a piece of equipment, even someone giving you a graduate student to work on the project. Any kind of resource of that nature is considered an in-kind contribution.
Does facility use qualify?
Yes. But remember, if it's facility use for the project that you are working on, that would go in facilities, equipment, and other resources, and not the actual facility use that you are referring to here.
Okay. The next statement and / question, I did not get the purpose for the supplemental funding for retaining early STEM faculty. Is this to support the entire project or the project personnel that may need the family leave, etc.?
Yeah, it's for the project personnel who are actually on leave, who in the past would be given a situation of, what am I going to do? I have to take care of a child, an elder care, etc. And if leaving meant leaving, they had to leave. This allows support for that individual to have a replacement, either a technician, a research assistant, to stand in for them for that designated period of time. But it is not for the project, it's for the personnel on that project when this issue arrives.
And FYI, Loretta and Rochelle have actually placed the link for that
great
conference into the chat. So please click on the link, save that.
Thanks, Rochelle. She's my colleague from DS, so she's helping me out. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Are there any other questions? Feel free to take yourself off of mute, or You can type your question in the chat.
So Jean, I have a question. If I was a faculty member, I'd ask. So a lot of institutions allow faculty members to do sort of outside consulting with other organizations. And so that needs to be reported as well, because that sometimes may be a month or two and it may go away.
Loretta. You get the prize for asking the $1 billion question. So, because we have been struggling, frankly, as well as our colleagues at NIH, with how to address the issue of consulting. And so we are going to the table that I keep, this fabulous table, is going to make it clear that if it is consulting, which falls underneath of your appointment and falls in line with your institutional policies and procedures, that it does not need to be reporting. If it doesn't fall into that category, it's some other form of consulting, you have to report it. But thank you for asking that. That's a heads up of great things you're going to be seeing when you see the table.
Great.
I just have a follow-up question to the family leave question that I asked earlier, if I may. Who should be submitting for this supplemental funding? Is it the project personnel who would put together?
No, this is submitted. This is submitted by the authorized organizational representative. It will be submitted as a supplemental funding request.
to
now,
the right.
We do not ask for the privacy protected information in there. No, that's an institutional responsibility. We will be very clear. Well, we're very clear in the current DCL and when it comes out in the PAP guide, precisely what kind of information you have to provide, as well as what exactly the AOR, what kind of certification that the authorized organizational representative is making about the family leave issue.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So does that mean, for example, this T2 project, we have multiple participants from other institutions. So in this case, is it the PI's responsibility to submit this kind of request?
It's not the PI. Again, even if it's a teaching project, this is a request for supplemental funding and would have to be submitted by the authorized organizational representative of the institution.
Jean, I think he's asking, the Track 2 projects have multiple sub-awards, and so they're wondering if it needs to come from the prime or if it can come from one of the sub-awardee institutions.
It would have to come through the prime organization the way we have our supplemental funding request system set up. There isn't the capability for a sub-awardee to ask for a supplement on an NSF award.
Okay.
I know you may have that in EPSCoR, but system-wise, we've got no capability to do that.
Thank you.
I've got another one. Are there plans to revise what can be reported for the time spent for the project? For now, person months, at this time, no. But based on feedback just like this from the community, we can always take a fresh look at that issue. But right now, it is exactly as you stated in the question.
Hi, Jean, it's Chi-Chi with NSF EPSCoR. I frequently get questions from our Track 4 PIs who have to travel to other locations for long periods of time on how to navigate traveling with their families. And I understand the guidance in terms of how it's dependent on the institutional policy and what would be supported by the home institution. But could you kind of help clarify what would be allowable in terms of travel to other locations and supporting childcare expenses or travel or lodging?
Okay, so you've asked a really jam-packed question.
Yes, I apologize in advance.
So if you are traveling to a conference okay,
Mhm.
and you have a child care issue, that is one thing, and that is covered in the uniform guidance. And it does have the requirement that it be, everyone else at your institution has to receive that same benefit. Okay, bottom line. But what we would pay in that situation is not the everyday child care, because you have to have child care every day. It's that, oh, I am out for a full evening, I'm not home. So it would do that delta, that in excess. That's what we would pay in that scenario. Now, you also talked about long-term travel. Well, there are very specific terms and conditions that address that issue in the PAP guide. It's got to be for 6 months or more. And those are very, very infrequent requests for us. It's more this other question of, I got to go to a conference, or I got to even go on travel. What is allowed to me in the way of paying childcare while I'm away? And right now, if it's to go to that conference, it's going to have to follow the uniform guidance, and your institution is going to have to be able to support that. And it would only be for the delta of what you normally would always have to pay anyway.
That is really helpful, and I appreciate that distinction. Just one follow-up, because a PI might request 6 months of support for one of our track 4 research fellowships. And so if they meet that criteria, then they can refer to the PAPG for guidance on what can be covered. Is that,
absolutely.
I want
Yes.
to amplify that.
Yes.
So, okay.
And,
thank you so much.
I mean, because it's an existing award, your cognizant grants officer in the Division of Grants and Agreements also can be very helpful in that regard.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It says, oh, I can't. For large projects, entering all participant and project information can be daunting. Are there plans to make it easier to batch upload this information in research.gov? That is something that we would have to work with your colleagues in the EPSCoR office to make happen, because right now you're absolutely right. It's a one person by one person thing. So we would have to work with them to look at that capability and see if that would be possible.
Awesome, thanks. Would you like me to read the next question for you?
Were you reviewing post-award disclosure of project information? You mentioned the AOR must submit information on description of any overlap duplication. What is overlap? An overlap is you've got a scope of project A and you've got a scope of project B. And there's a lot of duplication in both of those scopes. That's overlap. Now, a lot of what NSF does is not duplication. It's complementary research that we're funding to what someone else is funding. But the bottom line is it could be duplication. And we have had situations where that has been made aware to us from a program officer who says, whoa, or in the project report where you're submitting your scope and reporting on your accomplishments, and you're like, not on the same, it's not the same scope you thought it was, because they actually had another award that was very close to that they were actually submitting the information on. So it's anytime two scopes of work really intersect to a point where they actually are duplication. Thank you. You're welcome.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have no additional questions at this time.
Well, I thank you all for your time and attention. You're a fabulous group. And honestly, I can't wait till I can come to the next EPSCoR PI meeting in person.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely glad to have you. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jean.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your meeting. Take care now.